So, welcome everybody to Seattle's spooky bedtime stories. I hope everybody's in their pajamas and ready to get comfortable as we get our spook on tonight. So, I just want to get my PowerPoint here. And once upon a time, yes, in 1852, Seattle was born, and all the little cabins started to pop up left and right. So we enter into the strange of Seattle, and some of the first ghost stories that were ever recorded are these. December 2nd, 1889, Miss Henrietta Huller was actually visiting a family member getting ready for dinner when she was surprised to find that many of the locals had come to visit because they wanted to know why her son, who had been seen wandering the streets of Seattle, seemed so odd. He didn't have any expression on his face and wandered the streets aimlessly until no one could find him. Well, what was odd about this is actually her son and three others had actually gone on a canoe trip that morning. Little did they know they'd never be seen alive again. Now, in fact, their bodies were discovered 1 year later. In fact, only two of them, I should say. Dr. Thomas was actually never discovered. So what's odd about this story is that day, no one would have seen George wandering the streets because he had already left early that morning for their trip. So they believe that his soul had returned to the Seattle streets, maybe looking for someone to help them. Now, in 1933, near Pier 70, this was actually a very popular spot for many locals to visit at the time. And as they were sunbathing and just enjoying the water, they noticed a Native American walking along the beach. Now, what made this the oddest thing was the Native American was actually in old traditional attire. Now, they were accustomed to the fact that the Native Americans had already changed their dress codes to what the Americans were wearing. Now, back in the day, the natives didn't wear very much clothes. In fact, it wouldn't be uncommon to see a Native American in just a loincloth because they would actually use fish oil to cover their skin, which would hold in the heat. And this also was another reason why they didn't like to be around the Native Americans very much back in those days, because they actually did smell pretty bad because of that fish oil. But to see a Native American walking around in a loincloth along the beach, only to watch him vanish out of midair. The other odd thing is they said that he didn't even leave any footprints. Another famous ghost story of Seattle is Mother Damnable. This is Mary Ann Conklin. She was born in 1821. Now, she actually got a name for herself because she actually could cuss in 5 different languages. And she had the wildest temper you could actually imagine. Now, she married a Russian captain named David Bull Conklin in 1851. And this was a very short marriage because by 1853, he had actually abandoned her in Port Townsend. Apparently, he couldn't even handle her temper. Now, she makes her way to Seattle because Seattle was the boom in town at that time. And she runs into another captain who actually started Seattle's first hotel, known as the Felker House. In fact, in this picture here, you can actually see the Felker House. It's actually outlined in the square here. Now, this was run by Captain Felker. Now, at this time, Seattle was also very well known for their, as what they called seamstresses. These were the ladies of the night. And they actually ran a brothel on the second floor of this hotel. And so, being that this was a brothel, they also had these big, heavy bushes, as you can see in this photo, surrounding the hotel, which made it easy for the men to sneak in without being seen. Well, unfortunately, during the Battle of Seattle, the Navy had arrived in Seattle preparing to be able to confront the Native Americans who were threatening to attack. Well, they wanted to put a road that went right in front of the old hotel. But Madame Dandable, she wasn't going to have it. She actually sat on that porch with her apron full of rocks and her dogs ready to go. And anytime they tried to confront her, she was throwing rocks, cussing like a banshee, and the dogs were at their heels. This is one reason why they had a hard time putting in that road. But they were able to do the road and tearing down those bushes. And this actually helped to defend Seattle during that battle. Now, when she passed away, she was buried in the Seattle graveyard, which was known as Seattle Graveyard. This was actually in Pioneer Square. Now, due to the growth of the city, she was actually moved a couple times. She was moved over to Denny Park, which was also a cemetery back in the day. And then when she was being moved from Denny Park and getting ready to be moved up to Volunteer Park, which actually was once a cemetery as well, they found it quite odd that when they went to go pull up her coffin, they claimed that it weighed 1,300 pounds. Now, what made this odd is here's a woman who they claim only weighed less than 100 pounds. Why did her coffin weigh so much? This is not the first time she's been moved. So they proceeded to open the coffin, and to their surprise, they found that she had calcified, turning to stone. And they said that she had the wickedest smile on her face. Now they proceeded to move her to Volunteer Park, and then later was moved once again to Lakeview Cemetery, which she now rests. But they say that she is not resting. There are many rumors that she still is maybe in her original burial spot in Pioneer Square. Others claim too that she is also seen on the corner of where her actual hotel once stood on First and Jackson. And those working on the building that stands there or around the building have actually been pelted by small stones. They don't know where they come from. Some have even said that you may even hear the whispers in your ear. And sometimes they can't make out what's being said. But then other times they find out that it ends up being a cuss word in another language. The Seattle Underground. Now, the Seattle Underground actually came about after the Great Seattle Fire, June 6, 1889. Now, what really helped the Seattle Underground was the raising of the streets, which created these corridors around the buildings of Seattle. Now, it was back in 1907 when they had a plague scare, and they ended up abandoning these tunnels that go around the block. Now, these actually ended up turning the underground into more shadier businesses, such as opium dens, speakeasies. Even the women of the night would use these spaces as well. But what's most interesting are the children. A lot of the children would play in these underground spaces because for most of these locations, they were just an extended basement. And being that Seattle was a very rainy city, they kept the children dry as they played in these underground caverns. Now that actually is an EVP that we actually captured when investigating the Seattle Underground. And in this recording, you can actually hear us ask, "Can you tell us your name?" And in the response we get, "Edward." and I'll play it one more time for you guys. Now, there have been other things that have been seen in the Seattle Underground in the various different sections of the Underground. There's one section where you will actually see the sparkling images of women walking down the corridors, only to vanish. Now, they do believe that these are the spirits of the ladies of the night, still walking those sidewalks. Children have been seen and heard playing in these underground sections. I have actually had a personal experience where I was doing an interview for a local news crew. And late into the night, so actually I should say it was around 4 o'clock in the morning, one of the guys from the news crew says, "Hey, Ross, do you mind if we do a quick interview with you?" And I said, "Sure, that wouldn't be a problem." So as we start the interview around 4 o'clock in the morning, the crew kept stopping the interview, especially right in the middle of the interview. And so this was supposed to be just a 10-minute interview, and it ended up taking them over 45 minutes long. And I couldn't understand why it was taking them so long. And I could see that they were also struggling with some of the equipment and things. And so I finally asked them, I said, "Hey guys, is there anything we could do to kind of get through this? Because I really wanted to go home, go to bed. I didn't know if I was going to be able to make the half-hour drive just to get home." Well, the guy with the audio equipment, he pulls off his headphones and he says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Ross. It's like every time you start to talk, we keep getting all these interruptions. We're not sure what's causing that." And I got to thinking and realizing, oh, these guys are using, professional audio equipment. And that audio equipment actually has a 3-second delay. So I realized that what this guy is hearing during my interview are EVPs as they happen. And in one of those EVPs, he actually captured the voice of children giggling and talking and singing. Yeah. We've also had a situation where a little boy has been seen in jeans and a t-shirt in another section of the underground. And he's been witnessed by many people, especially on the underground tours. There have been times when the tour guide would actually be ready to shut the gate after all the tourists had left the underground section and ended up on the sidewalk. And people at the end of the tour would sit there and say, "Oh, there's still a child down there." And of course, you'd go and look and you would never see that child. Now, in this video that I'm going to play for you guys, I actually have where we had done an experiment in the underground. And the situation was one of my investigators was having an issue with something that she believed followed her from one of our investigations. So while we were in the underground, we decided to do an EVP session, and we wanted to monitor her habits during the EVP session, just to make sure she wasn't tampering with the recorder, because every time she did an EVP session, she kept getting this similar response. So I had her hold the recorder open palm with a camera on her hand so we could see that she wasn't touching or manipulating the recorder. And we all stood around and watched as she did this EVP session. And I'm going to play you guys that video.
We can't hear it, Ross.
You can't hear the video?
Did you go to the top and share the sound, the options?
What do you mean? So right where it says new share. So did you guys not hear the EVP that I played earlier?
It was really soft. I could hear it, but it was very soft.
So what do I need to do? I need to go to
I know it was at the top of the screen. I can't see what you are.
audio settings.
View options.
Should be view options at the top.
Mm-hmm.
But
This
there is a one that says share audio sound or something like that. Because that's how we were able to play the movies.
Mm-hmm. Maybe he probably has that since he's sharing his screen already.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay.
I'm in the audio and it says all the volumes are up all the way.
It should
Output
be
audio.
It should be at the top of your screen.
Yeah, you'll see something that says when you go to share a video, it'll be a little checkbox. It might be in the bottom central or bottom left
Bottom,
that
okay.
says you check a box to say share the audio or what plays through your computer speakers. Everyone else will hear.
Okay, so I'm at the top of the screen.
So maybe it was at the bottom, Jake?
Yeah, for him, it might be on the bottom, like where you do share screen or before you go
I don't have
into it.
anything at the bottom.
Okay. Oh, are you using the web or are you using the app?
I'm using the web.
Okay, I'm not sure where it is for the web.
So
Got
I
the
have,
app.
it says mute. I have a little arrow. It says stop video. I have a little arrow. Participants 7. New share. Pause.
Let me
share.
let me check audio settings real quick.
What's the little video? What's the little arrow by share video?
The carrot?
Yeah.
The up thing?
It's all video.
Yeah, it's
Doesn't
settings.
say, okay, share audio.
yeah, because I've got the app and when I do that,
Okay.
before I share it asks me if there's a little check mark that's in the center of the screen that says use the same audio.
So it's coming through. You just said it's very faint.
It's really faint, yeah.
Let me see if I can find it under share screen settings.
And it's just everybody on that, or is
Yeah, it's whoever you share the screen with.
okay.
Do you have a green box at the top that says that like we're like viewing your screen? And then there's a drop down that says view options next to it.
I
Yeah.
have a new share, but that's just when I share my screen. That's it.
I don't know.
Share
I wonder
computer
At the top of
sound.
your screen,
At the very top.
All
move
right.
your mouse up to the top of your screen.
At the very top, it says you are viewing Ross's screen. We see that.
Oh, to share your computer audio, you
You've
have
got
to
to
install
install
that device.
Okay.
Well, we had done it before, though.
Yeah.
But I think it's because Zoom was installed as an application on the host
Oh.
computer. It wasn't using a browser.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got the app.
Oh,
I've got the app. So when I do it, it's just a checkbox as soon as when I go to share.
Well, it's just good to get these kinks out now.
Yeah. I mean, the
All right.
app is free. So,
Well, so's the web. So yeah.
All right. So this is the only one that I have that has audio. So should I guess turn up your speakers right now, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, that's fine.
yeah, it's fine.
All right. So we'll try one more time.
Okay.
Okay.
No, I'm going to try something real quick.
I know you need my help, but I can't understand you. Please, can you just try to not scream? Can you try to tell me your name? Or what you'd like for us to call you? I have friends with me. They understand things in the spirit world. We all want to try to help. I know you came with me from Rolling Hills and I told you you would never have to go back there. But now I'm thinking you need to go someplace else. I'm going to turn off my recorder. Hopefully I can hear you. I know it's frustrating for you and it is for me too. I'm going to turn it off now.
All right, so hopefully that helped. So moving on to Joseph and the Chuckhole. Now this starts out as Barbara's story. She was actually on her way home after leaving a Christmas party from her work in Seattle. And as she was driving down the road, she was so shocked to see a child step in front of her car. Unfortunately, she had already been going too fast to stop in time, and she ran over the child. Now, in her panic, she got out of her car and started looking around and could not find the body of the child until she realized that the body was most likely still under her car. Now, at this time, a gentleman who had witnessed her stopping suddenly ran over to see if he could assist her. And she told him what had happened and asked if he would please look under the car. And he did. And there was nobody there. No sight of this boy was to be found. Now, as I did research, I did discover an interesting story. It was in May of 1898 at 4:30 p.m. A 10-year-old boy named Joseph was actually playing in one of the most well-known chuckholes in Seattle. Now, these chuckholes were pretty big due to the fact the one at 3rd and Jackson was also known as the Great Jackson Street Chuckhole. And that is due to the fact that the streets were so muddy. And with the constant traffic of horses and wagons, they created these huge chuckholes that were filled with nothing but sawdust and more mud, making them very much like a sea of oatmeal, if you can imagine. And in this photo, you can see an exact example of a horse being sunk into one of these chuckholes. Now, this chuckhole, the Great Jackson Street Chuckhole, was 8 feet deep and 16 feet wide. And the kids loved to play in these things. In fact, they'd build little boats and they would actually paddle themselves across these chuckholes. And they would also take these long poles and they would push themselves across. Well, that's exactly what Joseph was doing. He was alone on the boat, and he decided to imitate his friends who were doing this earlier today. And he stuck the pole into the mud, and he pushed himself across. And he stuck it back into the bottom of that chuck hole and was pushing himself across, when all of a sudden the pole actually got stuck. Instead of letting go of the pole, though, Joseph hung on to the pole while the boat continued to move underneath him, causing this boy to slide into the water. Unfortunately, Joseph didn't know how to swim, and he actually sank to the bottom. Now, over 2,000 voyeurs watched as men after men jumped into this chuckhole trying to rescue this boy. And the newspaper article said that it was one of the most comical things that you can imagine. These guys were constantly falling over each other, trying to reach that boy. And people were standing around laughing and giggling and pointing at all this. Well, it wasn't until Joseph's father showed up at the scene and he yelled out to the audience, "It is my poor boy that has drowned. Have you no regard for my grief?" At that moment, silence filled the area as they continued to search for the boy. And by 6 o'clock, they had actually retrieved his body. Now, Dr. Rogers believed that you could probably bring somebody back even if they've been in the water for that long. So he took the boy over to a bathhouse and worked on that boy for 3 hours. Unfortunately, he was not able to bring poor Joseph back. And the very next day, the newspapers stated, "Boy drowns in Seattle streets." Since that moment on, Seattle made strict rules that any child needed to have swimming lessons. And also life preservers were put at all the corners of the Seattle blocks. So I believe that Barbara may have confronted Joseph on the very spot where he had drowned. The Sea King. Now, the Sea King was built in 1877, and it was actually considered the largest vessel ever built out of Maine. Now, this was a grand ship. In fact, all the wood was handpicked to be the best wood that you could ever imagine. And it sailed from the East Coast over to the West Coast. And it happened to be in San Francisco in 1906 when the great San Francisco earthquake had struck. Now, this was a 7.8 magnitude earthquake, which took 3,000 lives and caused over 80% of the damage to the city. Now, due that the ship needed to go back out, they decided to head back to Seattle so that they could actually retrieve lumber to start to rebuild San Francisco. Now, whenever these ships go out to sea, they actually would fill their ballasts with usually dirt or rocks, just to help to keep the ship balanced. Well, being that San Francisco had now had so much rubble, they decided to help the city by taking a lot of this rubble out to sea with them to help balance out the ship. So they filled the ballast with all this rubble from the buildings. And what was interesting is as the ship made its way to Seattle, many of the crew had terrible, terrible things happen. They had eerie feelings. They would hear moans and screams in the middle of the night. They'd hear people walking about the ship when there was nobody there. Well, it wasn't until they actually arrived in Seattle and they started to take out all that rubble from San Francisco when they realized that within the rubble were the twisted bodies of victims that had died in the San Francisco earthquake. Ever since then, they felt that the ship was cursed, and no seafaring man wanted to be on that ship. And this made things very difficult for the Sea King. And so they actually had to sell the ship many times. And finally, when it decided to go back over to the East Coast, they actually felt that things were getting better for the Sea King. In fact, she had gone 110 days without a loss of sail or hand. But unfortunately, in 1917, a storm had struck, and the ship was lost at sea. Dutch Ned. Now, Dutch Ned is a very interesting Seattle character. He was actually born in 1826. And when he arrived in Seattle in 1854, a lot of people tended to tease him a little bit because they said he was a bit slow. Now, they said that he was this way because he had received an injury when he was a child. Now, his life was a very simple life. He actually had a shack in in one of the corners of Seattle, and he would actually be in charge of taking the sawdust from the lumber mill and fill in the chuck holes throughout Seattle. Yeah, so he would go through the streets of Seattle with his red wooden wagon, filling in these holes. That was his life, a very simple one, and he didn't make very much money. Well, one of his biggest fears was he never wanted to be forgotten. Even though many of the pioneers made him the butt of a lot of their jokes, he still wanted to be remembered. And so what happened is he saved up every bit of money that he could to build his little house in the cemetery. This was a mausoleum that he saved up for, and it was going to be a little grand mausoleum so that people would always remember him whenever they walked by and saw this little building in the middle of the cemetery. And he was so proud of this building that he called it his little house, and he'd have little picnics inside of it, and he'd invite everybody over. And he constantly visited, cleaning it, sweeping it, and sometimes he'd even spend the night every so often. Well, a lot of the locals decided to tease him even more. And they threatened that when he died, they were just going to throw him in a potter's field. And this really bothered him. So the poor guy actually slept in the funeral home and spent every waking moment that he could at that funeral home when he wasn't out in the streets filling them with sawdust, because he wanted to be there, ready to go when his time came. And his time did come. But unfortunately, after his death, he was buried in his little mausoleum, his little house. But by the 1970s, his little mausoleum took on too much decay, and the cemetery actually had to tear it down. And so if you happen to visit Lakeview Cemetery, you will actually see what looks like a door laid into the ground. And that is the door to his little house, where he is buried underneath. Now, many people do believe that he also is still around. Maybe because his little house didn't stay like he was hoping. And again, he never wanted to be forgotten. But he is remembered quite a bit. He's been featured in Seattle history books. But he's also been seen wandering the streets of Pioneer Square, still filling in those holes that he believes that are there. Some have actually even seen him wandering the Lakeview Cemetery, maybe looking for where his little house once stood. Marion Zoinchek. Now, Marion Zoinchek is most known for the fact that on August 8th, 1936, he fell to his death. Now, he was born December 5th, 1901. And in this photo here, this is actually his new bride, Ruby Nix. Now, Ruby Nix, actually, they had met on a blind date, ended up being a one-night stand, but they were married a week later. This is a prime example of the crazy life that he lived. He was known to cause a lot of disturbances. Now, he was elected to Congress at the age of 32. And with his visits to Washington, D.C., he was known to be seen splashing in the fountains with him and his wife. He also drove the car on the city sidewalks and even drove the car right up to the front steps of the White House, going right up the White House lawn. Yeah, this caused a lot of problems for locals, but many people loved his little antics. He was kicked out of a very fine dining restaurant because he decided to lap up his soup like a dog. Yeah, him and his wife, actually, while they were on their honeymoon in Puerto Rico, were escorted out of their hotel after they were out on the roof throwing coconuts at people. Yeah. Now, he was actually committed in 1936. And believe me, these stories continue on. There are newspaper article upon newspaper articles of all these crazy shenanigans that this guy would do. I mean, one night on New Year's Eve, he broke into the hotel's switchboard and started calling all the rooms to wish everybody a Happy New Year. And again, many people thought that he was crazy, to the point like he was committed, but he actually escaped. Now, he returned to Seattle because he wanted to continue to run, but they had told him that he shouldn't run anymore. In fact, his best friend, who was also in Congress, decided to run against him, and this really upset him. So on August 8th, 1936, he was actually in his office. Now, he had rented out the 5th and 6th floors of the Arctic Club for his headquarters, because he was still going to continue to run even though everybody told him not to. Well, as his brother-in-law had pulled his car up with his wife in the passenger seat, they were picking him up for lunch. His brother-in-law goes up to the 5th floor to go get Marion. And he says that as he walked into the room, Marion said, "Oh, I'm just going to go grab my jacket." But instead of grabbing his jacket, he leaped from the window. And he actually landed just outside the car where his wife was waiting for him. Now, there's some interesting things about this story, but I'm going to play you guys this video real quick. There's no audio, but this is a video clip from a news clip that was filmed the day after his suicide. And you can see the Arctic Club, which is this building right here. You will see that they'll focus on the window that he jumped from. And people on the sidewalks will point to the window. So you can actually enjoy a little bit of history right here. And that is where he landed. And this young man is standing right at the spot where he landed. Of course, these men across the street are pointing up to the window. And that is his suicide note that he had left behind. Now, the story gets even more interesting. Now, we introduced the Arctic Club because many people wonder if it was suicide. Marion Zoinchek, throughout all of his issues, had actually quite a few enemies. Some say that his brother-in-law may have actually even pushed him out the window because he is the last person to see him alive. Other people say that there are other people that didn't want him to run again and felt that he could have won, decided to get rid of him. So we're not sure exactly what happened, if it was suicide or not, but he is still seen at the Art Club to this day. Now, the elevators are constantly being called to the 5th floor when there's nobody calling for the elevators. There's one story where one young woman had actually checked into the hotel. She went from the counter, check-in counter, went right into the elevator, and then a couple minutes later came down the stairs and asked to check out right away. And of course, the person at the front desk was concerned and said, is there something wrong with your room? And she's like, I never even made it to my room. She said that when she stepped into the elevator, all of a sudden there was a gentleman standing behind her, and he just was laughing at her. And she turned around, and as the elevator door opened up behind her, she couldn't take her eyes off of him, so she started stepping back, and as she stepped back, he just vanished right in front of her eyes. She immediately left after that. And that's not the first time. Many people have felt that when they were stepped into the elevator alone, by the time they get off the elevator, after only just being in there by themselves, when they step out of the elevator, they're surprised to see a gentleman standing in the elevator. Yeah. Now, in his room, the office where he had jumped from, which has now been turned into a guest room, many guests have actually reported in the middle of the night, you will hear somebody pacing at the foot of the bed, back and forth all night. It tends to keep them up. They also will hear knocking. Some people will hear knocking on their door, thinking, somebody had come to their door. They go to answer it. There's nobody there. Nobody in the halls. Yeah. So they do believe that maybe Marion is still around because he may not have committed suicide. There is still a mystery to be solved here. Or maybe he did, and there's just a little regret left behind. Now, Merchant's Cafe. Merchant's Cafe was established in 1890 and is actually recorded to be one of Seattle's oldest running restaurants. If you actually go inside the building, you will actually see a brass plate right at the front door that points downwards, indicating the German restaurant that used to be downstairs. Now, this place has actually been featured on quite a few television shows, such as Dead Files and When Ghosts Attack. Now, I actually have had quite a few personal experiences at Merchant's Cafe. But before I go into the story about this photo right here, I will tell you one of my personal encounters. Now, I was actually getting ready. I was doing a tour. It was a 6 o'clock tour. I had taken everybody downstairs, and I wanted to introduce them to the women's restroom. And it was a slow night, so I had a small group. So it was a small enough group that I could actually take them down into the hallway that leads to the women's restroom, which is right at the very end of the hall. Now, I'm the first one to enter the hallway, and right when I walked into the hallway, I saw the women's restroom door slam shut. And it slammed hard enough that I was startled. And everybody on the tour that was right behind me, they all heard it. So I quickly turned around. I'm looking for the first woman on the tour, and I said, could you please check and see if there's anybody in there? Now, of course, she refused. She did not want to do this alone. But she did ask one of her girlfriends to join her. And they both go in the women's restroom, and there's nobody in there. Now, the story I was actually getting ready to share with them was about one of the customers that had come to the restaurant for lunch. And so she decided to go downstairs to use the women's restroom. And when she got to the bottom step, she looks up and she sees a woman ahead of her go into the women's restroom and shut the door behind her. Now, this woman was not aware if this was a single person restroom or a multiple person restroom, but being the size of the building or the restaurant, she just assumed that this is probably going to be a single. So she decided to just go ahead and wait until that, woman was done. Well, she's waiting and waiting and waiting, and no one's coming out of that woman's restroom. So she decides to go check on her. And when she opens the door, there's nobody in there. Now, Darcy, who's the owner, there has been plenty of times when she'll be alone closing down the restaurant and the bar. And before she heads home, she'll use the women's restroom because she's got a long drive ahead of her. And while she's in the stall, she'll actually hear the faucets being turned on and off by themselves. Yeah, the first few times she experienced that, she admitted she was running up the stairs, pulling up her pants. Now, guys aren't safe either. There's been plenty of times when men will be in the men's restroom doing their business, and they'll actually hear a woman whisper into their ear. And she always says, "Can you hear me?" Now, one night, shortly after Thanksgiving, or I should say one morning, sorry. It was one morning, early in the morning, just after Thanksgiving, the manager comes in to prep for that day. And when he gets to the door, he realizes that something tragic had happened here. So he stands outside the front door, hasn't gone into the building, and he immediately calls Darcy. And he tells her that he thinks that somebody had been murdered in the building. And she goes, "Well, why do you say that?" He says, "Because there's all this red stuff seeping from underneath the front door." So he finally gets the courage to open the door, and to his surprise, he finds that all the wine bottles on the wine rack had been thrown off the wine rack. And as you can see in the photo here, this is actually over towards the end of the bar here. The wine rack is way over on the wall here, and that wine rack is still fastened to the wall, secure. But all the wine bottles are off of it. Over $500 worth of wine was destroyed that night. Now, Darcy did not want to upset whatever it was because she can't afford to have, this happen again. So she decides to make friends with the ghost. So she takes a shot and she sets it on the safe below the wine rack. And she says, "This is for you. I would like us to be friends." Right after she does this, the very next day, the employees are calling and they're complaining about how hot and stuffy this place is. Now, it's kind of surprising for her because, remember, this is right after Thanksgiving. We're in our fall going into our winter months. And for some reason, this place is really hot and stuffy. It's cold outside. And she can't figure out what's going on. She hires professionals to come in and they can't figure out what's going on. Now, this happens for 3 days in a row. On the third night, she's closing down the bar. And she walks by the safe and she sees that shot still sitting there. Now, it hadn't been touched, but it's collected some dust. A few flies had gotten in there, so she decides to dump it. But she forgets to replace it. The very next day, the building's cold again. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you guys is a video clip that was captured one night when Tony, who's the other owner, had experienced something odd himself. Now, he was working the bar, and he was at the complete opposite end. Now, in the photo that you see where the wine bottles are, that seems to be the most active part of the bar. And so he's at the opposite side of the bar, and there's a couple sitting at that end of the bar across from the wine rack. And all of a sudden, one of the bottles hits the ground. And he sees it through the corner of his eye, but he immediately thinks that the couple sitting across from the bar are messing with things at the bar, throwing things across, the bar, causing this bottle to fall off the shelf. So he goes and he confronts them. He's like, "What are you guys doing to my bar? Why are you causing, this havoc, And they're like, "We didn't do anything. We didn't do anything." And they claim that they saw the bottle lift off the shelf and then just tip over. So Tony's like, "Well, that's fine. I've got it all on video." So sure enough, he goes to the security system, pulls up that moment in the video, and to his surprise, that's exactly what happened. And I will actually play you guys the video. So there's no audio, so you don't have to worry about that. But you got Tony right here at the end of the bar. And this is where the bottle falls. You see it right there? It fell. He sees it, and he goes to confront them. And this is a zoomed version of it. So here it is again. Yeah. So it's still a very active place today. And we're hoping in the near future we'll actually be able to do merchant cafe nights where we can actually spend an hour or two just telling you guys so many stories that happen at Merchant's Cafe. So moving on. I-90, the floating bridge. Now, it was in 1979 when a young woman vanished without a trace. No one knows exactly what happened to her, but you also have to understand this was a time when serial killers like, Ted Bundy and Gary Ridgway were at large. So women disappearing, unfortunately, was not an odd thing. This happened quite often, but of course, they immediately thought that something tragic had happened to her. Now, on rainy nights after her disappearance, people driving by this bridge would actually see a woman walking along the edge of the bridge. She has no protection on to protect her from the rain. And of course, anybody passing by seeing a young woman in this condition would immediately pull over just to offer her assistance, get her out of the rain. But when they pull over to go help her, they look back and there's nobody there. And this had been reported so many times. This mysterious woman that shows up on rainy nights walking across the floating bridge. Well, it wasn't until 1981 when they actually had to do repairs to the bridge. And as they were down under the bridge, under the water, they discovered a car. And in the car was this young woman that had disappeared. Yeah. Come to find out that there was actually a small buckle in the bridge. And they believe that she was speeding across the bridge heading towards Vashon Island when she hit that bump too hard and causing the car to go over the edge. Ever since they discovered her body, she's never been seen again. So we do believe that she was walking that bridge just to let people know where she was. Homestead Restaurant. Now, Homestead is one of my personal favorites. This was actually built in 1904 by the, it was built in 1904 by the Bernard family until and I should say they stayed in this until 1907. Now it's a short time to be in this place, but they actually donated the building so that it could be used in this very forested area. Back in the day, that West Seattle area was very popular for camping sites. Now, it was in 1950s when it became a restaurant. And in 1960s, it was actually purchased by Doris Nelson. And she had this place until 2004. Now, Doris made this place very well known in West Seattle. In fact, it was very famous for its fried chicken. Apparently, she had this amazing recipe. So people all over the world would actually visit this place for her famous fried chicken. Now, what happens is, in 2006, Tom purchases the place. Now, they're hoping that they could actually make a profit. Of course, the building did need some, updates. And they felt with the updates, they could actually probably sell the restaurant for twice of what it was worth. And I do believe they paid a little more than $1 million for it, hoping that they could turn around and flip it for over $2 million. That was their main goal here. But right when they took over this place, strange things started to happen. Yeah, dishes were flying off the shelves, flying off of tables and shattering. A refrigerator door lifted off of its hinges and flew across the room. And strange noises would be heard. They would hear walking upstairs when there was nobody up there. Now, Doris did live up there. She had a small little apartment on the second floor. Now, she had also died there as well. And that was back in 2004. So they started to wonder if this might be Doris. still hanging on to her treasured, restaurant. Well, Tom ended up seeking. Oh, I forgot to. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, because one of the other things too is he would also receive phone calls from the restaurant in the middle of the night when nobody was there. And there would be nobody on the other end of the phone. But every so often that restaurant would call him, and of course he would answer just to make sure everything was okay. And there's nobody there. Now, after all this stuff, he actually contacted a Chinese psychic just to see what was going on. And the psychic did pick up on Doris and said that Doris was not happy with everything that was going on, that they weren't taking the necessary care of this building. And things continued to get worse and worse. Now, in fact, they know it was Doris because of one incident where a customer had gone to the restroom upstairs. And when she got to the top of the stairs, she sees this elderly woman standing at the top of the stairs. Now, of course, she doesn't think much of it. She just thinks it's another customer. So she goes into the women's restroom, does her business, comes back out. The woman's gone. But as she's coming back down the stairs, she's looking at some of the old photos of Homestead Restaurant. And in one of the photos is that elderly woman. So, of course, she asks who that woman is. And they said, oh, that's Doris. And she said, oh, that's nice. She's still around. She said, no, she died a couple years ago. Yeah. Now, what happens is in 2008, Tom and his business partner have a possible buyer. And they're getting the papers drawn up. And they're really excited about this. They're now able to pass this, hotel on to somebody else, and they can move on to other things. Because to be honest, this restaurant ended up being kind of a pain in the neck for them. Because one of the things that they didn't realize is the historic value that this place had. And so the Historic Society made this renovations very difficult for them and very costly. So that was one of the biggest problems that they had with dealing with this building. So now they had a buyer to take this, headache off of their hands. Well, as soon as things were getting ready for that new buyer, there was a fire, which destroyed most of the building. Yeah, pretty much gutted the building. In this photo, you can actually see some of the remains. The inside was completely gutted. You can see the historic, fireplace that they had there that was all made from the rocks along the beaches there. Yeah. So they lost out on that sale. Now, that didn't stop the activity. In fact, after that fire happened, they started to notice handprints showing up on the sooty walls. Handprints that they don't know how they got there. The walking was continued to be heard. In fact, I can validate that sound because I myself was there on a walkthrough. We were just visiting to actually consider doing an investigation here. Now, the thing is, we weren't prepared for a full investigation, and I just wanted to see the condition of the building to see if it would even be safe for our investigations. And as we were wrapping up for the night and we got a little quick tour, all of a sudden we were all downstairs when we heard heavy footsteps walking around upstairs. And we all just stood there staring at each other. I know a few people wanted to run upstairs, and I told them to wait. I wanted to see how this would play out. And so it lasted for a good minute, maybe a little bit more, when it finally just stopped. And right when it stopped, we immediately went up there to see what was going on, if anybody had, snuck into the building. And there was no sign of anybody. So I can validate that walking sound does happen. Now, I'll also play you guys a video from another experience that we had or didn't know we had until reviewing the video itself. Now, I myself was upstairs. This is my camera. I'm setting things up, so I'm not really paying attention to what's going on. And June is actually next to me as she's setting up her gear as well. And we're ready to be the two-man team on the second floor while the rest of the people were downstairs. And in this video, you will actually see something peeking from behind the doorway. Did it freeze up here? Oh. Sorry, guys. I guess it's freezing up here. Let me try. There it goes. I don't know why it keeps freezing. Let me start it over here. It's not that long. There it goes. Oh, man. Oh, there it is right there. See it peeking out. And then it ducks behind the door. All right, let's go back. Sorry, guys. I don't know why it's doing this. You can see it ducked behind the door. It moved. And I apologize. I don't know why it's skipping around like that. It is actually on our website at aghost.org. You can see the full video there where I slow it down and everything. So we'll move on. Probably the next video is going to be like that too. So let's find out. So the spooky little girl, one of the last stories I'm going to share with you guys, is actually another Seattle underground location where when we originally moved into our location that we once had, this wooden chair was discovered at the old restaurant. And this chair that I decided to keep would move around every day to a different location. And I actually started marking the chair with spots, writing chalk circles around the legs. And I'd come back the next day knowing I was the last person to leave, the first one back. And again, the chair would be found in another location. So I decided to purchase this doll for a little girl that I knew that haunted a location. And this doll actually has a wind-up key in her back. It will play old music. It's a little music box inside of her. And there have been times when we will be alone and people will actually hear that music box play by itself. So I actually was lucky enough to have a team capture that phenomena. And I'm going to play this video for you guys. And hopefully it'll play okay as well. So let's see how this one will play out.
Did you guys get your balls? Oh, hey. Did you hear that? Hush.
So the most amazing thing about that video is when the team lead is trying to get everybody to be quiet because they're so excited about the doll playing music that he says hush out loud to shut everybody up. But right when he says hush out loud, the dolls stop too. So in closing, I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. I'm sorry for a few of the technical errors that we've had, but I will be doing this again. Might add a couple new stories, but if you want to learn some more about my books, I do have Ghostology 101, Spooked in Seattle, which features a lot of the stories that you heard tonight. I also have Tacoma's Haunted History, My Haunted Journal, Psychology for the Ghost Hunter is soon to come out, and Paranormal Files, West Virginia. Also, keep in mind that I do a series called Haunted with David Weatherly, and this is a few of the books that we have out already and coming out soon. And Haunted Churches does come out next month, so look for that, with followed by Haunted Historic Hotels. So again, thank you guys. Tips are always greatly appreciated, and be safe out there.